I'm a Dominican sister, right? So seeking truth is a core part of who I am. And I have my outside criteria that I measure everything against is we are all connected with and in a compassionate and a loving God who desires relationship with us and who actively seeks and pursues this relationship, inviting us in constantly, perpetually. So I have a ritual that's non-negotiable. When I wake up, it's 1 hour ritual. And okay, so the first thing I have to do, I have a popcorn brain. As soon as I open my eyes, my thoughts start popping. And I can't take that popcorn brain into prayer. It's not quiet. So I divide my 1 hour into 3 20-minute segments. In the first segment, I do mindfulness activity. I focus on my breathing. I ask, how are things in this head of mine? How are things in this body of mine? I notice my thoughts non-judgmentally and I let them pass away and I come back to my breathing. And I do that usually for 20 minutes. And at the end of that period, then I have a much calmer, clear mind and I enter into a 20-minute period of study. That study can be, I'm doing Ken Untner's Lent book. Sometimes I do the daily readings, but I'm focusing a lot right now on Elizabeth Johnson's book, Come Have Breakfast. And that is perfect because she provides scriptural support for my belief that we are all connected with a loving, compassionate, forgiving God who desires connection. So that is like really exciting to me. And then I enter into the final 2 minutes. That's the Dominican contemplative phase of my prayer, seeking truth. And I bring everything to that, but I do it in a very specific way. Now you may or you may not know that our heart has neurons. This is huge, okay? At day 21 in the uterus, day 21, we undergo this process called differentiation where our cells decide what they're gonna be. And then they're that for the rest of their lives. So why are neurons specialized cells of the brain and the nervous system in the heart? Maybe, just maybe, it's because we're supposed to listen to our heart as well as to our brain. So during this final 20-minute contemplative phase, I literally cup my heart. And that's where I meet my compassionate God. And I bring my life to that and say, here's what's going on. How do I become more connected? How do I become more compassionate? How do I bring your desire for connection to the rest of the world? Now, I wish I could tell you that at the end of that 20 minutes, I'm this perfect, all-forgiving person, but yeah, life, it just doesn't work that way. That's not true. But what it does do is it sets me up so that every day, my intent is to be a person who brings connection, compassion, and the love of God into the world. So that's my intent. Am I always successful? No. Is anybody? No. But I'm going to keep doing it every single day. So that's how I seek truth. For me, I know when I have found truth by the consequences of that action. And I'm not just talking about my actions. Sometimes actions of other people enter into my world. And what's the consequence of that action? If the consequence of that action is connection, love your neighbor, compassion, forgiveness, right relationship, then I know that I have found truth. If the consequence of that action is the reverse of all of that criteria that I hold for truth, then it is not truth. So it's my heart agrees, my head agrees, it matches my criteria. Truth. I mean, it sounds so simple, didn't I? It's not simple, but it's my method for seeking truth and declaring something truth.
Well, I'd like to suggest we really use the 4 pillars, at least I do. And first of all would be prayer. That in seeking truth, one prays about it, one sits with the divine mystery, with your God, and really ask, God to help you to discover, to deeper understand what truth is. And secondly, I think then we would study. So after one prays, one then studies, which is a little bit different than praying. It involves searching, it involves reading, it involves just, again, stepping back and assimilating what one has read or studied. So you get the facts and you study them. Thirdly, I think there's the piece of community. So having done that as myself as an individual, I then have the community, the other sisters or associates or partners in mission, to talk about what that reality is. What did I learn from my prayer? How was I inspired? How were the other women inspired, or men that I'll be speaking with? What has the study done for me to enlighten me, and to bring that forth with others and to hear what they have to say about it? So prayer, study, community, and then preaching, or the ministry, is basically then to speak that truth to people, either in writing, either in speaking, whatever, that one says, this is how I see what this truth is, based on prayer, study, my community, and now I bring this forth to you to reflect how your life is seen in light of this truth. I believe one knows when one has found truth when it resonates with the person that you are, when there's a sense of, this is who I am, this is being faithful to who I am as a person, how God has created me to be in this world. When that fact, when that reality sort of just makes sense to me in my life, and not just because of facts and figures, which are very important, but they have led me to a deeper understanding, truth of my own self among the people in the world. So that sense of being faithful to oneself and one's position that one has in the world.
Well, I seek truth by trying to live with integrity, by trying to be the person I seem to be. No pretensions, no airs, that I think is, that is a little in short supply these days, but it is what I try to do. Now, that's not to say that I do it perfectly, but it is what I try to do. Now, also, in this process of seeking the truth, it seems as though that there are times that also we are called to step up and articulate the truth when the situation calls for us. To have the courage to do that, and sometimes takes courage. This is, of course, where our own background, our bailiwick, as it were, is the whole preaching of truth. I mean, that's why the order exists. And you know, it is a wonderful, wonderful thing to be able to articulate the truth when people are confused or troubled. I have done a lot of work in spiritual direction. And one of the things that happens when people come there is they begin to talk about their experience of whom they consider to be the true God of Revelation. But what one finds sometimes is that they learned about a God who was pretty vengeful. You know, we always said God is loving, but God is also just. And that means God has to punish. And that is not the truth. God does not punish. Evil is punished because in and of itself, it causes human suffering and all kinds of destructive dynamics. But it is not God that is doing this. God is love. And in order to help people to come to this real conviction is so exciting, because the truth is so liberating, so freeing, so wonderful, so hopeful, so possible of generating joy, you know. And so that's all a part of the way that I seek truth and try to spread it. We try the best we can to determine whether something falls into the realm of reality, or is this something that is just made up, you know. Now, sometimes when we want to know the right way, the truthful way to proceed with something, we're advised to ask ourselves, what is this likely to lead to? And if we can see that it will lead to something good and generous and caring, we can be pretty sure that that's the truthful and right way to go. St. Ignatius, in his exercises, has what he calls rules for discernment. And what he tells people to do is to compare possibilities of two different ways to go, and then to notice how we feel when we think about those. And so if we think of a possibility of doing something that we would like to do in league with God, as it were, the right thing, if what happens when we consider that option, we begin to get heavy and discouraged and frightened and upset and even perhaps self-oriented, you know, we can be reasonably sure, he says, that this is not God's movement in us. This is not the path of truth, of divine truth. Whereas when we look at something as a possibility, we consider it. It may not always be easy, but when we consider it, and it generates in us a hope, a lightness of heart, a trust, an excitement for something that is good, then it is ordinarily safe to say that that is the path that God is indicating, and that that is the path of the true pursuit that God is leading us toward. And that, of course, you know, we hear Dominicans talk about truth. Catherine of Siena used to pray. What did she say? Clothe me with yourself, divine truth, you know. And of course, the whole thing boils down to the reality that Jesus articulates in John 8, where he says, you shall know the truth. If you follow me, you shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
Well, I just finished, retired from 35 years of community organizing. One of our methodologies is the one-on-one. So getting to know people one-on-one, asking them questions, asking them what motivates them, those kind of things. So I think that it's an important thing to be in relationship. Relationships are key to discovering the world around us. You know, it's not just in books. It is that, and Wikipedia. Follow the footnotes, but also getting to know people and where do they come from? What's their motivation? So I think that's using that one-on-one tool. And then I think the other thing I learned in community organizing is reflection. You know, reflecting on what I've heard from other folks, what I've done, what my emotions were in something, and beginning to uncover the background of everything. So reflection, I think, is the other, sometimes known as contemplation, but I think reflection. Contemplating on scriptures and other works of the world, so to speak, you know. So I think one-on-ones, relationships, and contemplation or reflection. I think that it's more instinct, and it, you know, it's not like something that you can actually grab and possess. I think that it's a feeling you're in the right direction more than anything else. So it's also something that you have to, it's a discipline to keep looking at things. I think finding out what the motivation is and what my own motivation is. So again, how do I know I found truth? I think it's the reflection and the contemplation on what exactly is happening. And then is it feeling like it's God-given?
How do I seek truth? Well, I do a lot of reading. I do listen to the news, and I try to listen to a number of different stations so I get different viewpoints. The other thing I do is I try to find people who have studied something a long time, like in science, or even theologians. You know, that's another interesting thing. I mean, we study a lot of theology, and theology has changed. You know, look at the time of the Inquisition. They thought they knew exactly who God was and what he did, and if you didn't agree, you were put to the stake. Oh my gosh, I'm glad we're not in those times, because we realize there are many, God is multi. So who's to say that the way I relate to God is the only way? Who's to say that my image of God is the only image? Jesus didn't say that. Now, we translate some of his writings as God the Father, but maybe that's our translation. Maybe that's not what he really said or meant. I don't know. I don't know the Jewish that he spoke. But I do know that translators put their own spin on things. So I tend to focus, besides Jesus, on Mary and what were the women doing, you know, because they're the ones who were making the meals and washing the dishes and doing the laundry, and you know, while these guys are bumping around the place, you know. So I always want to follow the women, because I feel like they have to face the truth of things. They can't be spouting out about something. That doesn't help what they have to do. So I tend to follow the women. But I feel like, and of course, what we have of Jesus' teachings are what his disciples interpreted, how they heard it. So it's not necessarily fact. So I keep all that in mind. And I don't get too, like, if somebody thinks different than me, I don't get too uptight. You know, I worked in community development most of my career. And I found that when you went and talked to the people who were living in the situation, you got a very different view than when you talk to, the foundation that funds them, or the city council that talks about that area or something. So I always made a point of talking with the people who were going to be affected and say, how do you view this? What will this do for you? Will it be helpful? In what ways would it be helpful? I like I said before, I don't think, even when I think I found the truth, I don't think that's the end. It can still change. But, you know, you get a sense from somebody when they're telling you the truth or when they're telling you a story. So sometimes you have to rely on your gut to say, this isn't quite jibing here. So that's why I think you just have to keep on keeping on. And the more science discovers, the more history, you know, we unearth history, etc. They just keep saying, wow, we didn't know, look, there was just a new discovery of a dinosaur, you know, and it's like, we didn't even know these existed. I mean, so I think you have to continue on the path and not think you can sit back and it's over, because It isn't. Until the Earth crumbles away to cosmic dust, there's always more to learn. And people who may travel to those other planets, boy, they've got a lot to learn.
Yeah, that can be really difficult and really challenging, especially for things that are close to the truth. My experience is one judge that I put up against what I'm learning. Other people's opinions that I value. Previous study that I've done, see if it makes some sense. And especially in this time when we're learning how the world evolves, truth also evolves as we discover more. And so while it may not have been a truth I learned when I was back in high school, it is something I'm discovering today, and it's a new edge of truth, a new facet of the truth. And probably I want to give credit to my Dominican education as well, that has helped me be a critical thinker and being able to make some judgments. Not that they're always 100% true, but it helps me step back a little bit and say, what do I think about this? And what judgment do I make on it? Yeah. There's something that happens in my gut that says, that's it, or it's true, or it's right. It resonates, and sometimes it resonates really deeply within, or doesn't resonate, so I know it's not a truth that I want to hang on to, or it is something I want to explore even further. Or it challenges a previous belief, a previous notion I've had. And while it's something to explore further, I can hold it that way without having it come to a conclusion of any sort that I want to base my life on, for instance. But it's in process, and I'm okay with that. It's kind of a both and. Both, I see there's some wisdom in that, but I don't buy into it totally. Well, I think the biggest example would be some of the new things that we're learning about Earth and the cosmos, evolution. I'm quite fascinated with the work of Teilhard de Chardin. And I was just watching a recent movie they've made on him, on his life. And I think he went out to an edge where nobody had gone before. And so there he was exploring this search for truth that hadn't been articulated. He was told it was not compatible with the Catholic faith. And he went ahead and studied anyhow. And it's an example of being true to what you're discovering. And it's a lonely position. I really felt for him. And I think there are a number of others of us in this world today that are also exploring that same evolutionary set of truths and finding our way together. And some people are ahead, and some of us are, coming up behind, but still exploring. And I'd say that's probably the biggest example I can think of, because again, it's a matter of weighing it and saying, that's not my experience, but tell me about your experience, because maybe you've had something that I'm not thinking about, but it also has made sense to somebody I might admire. And then I really have to think about it, because how did they get there? And what else do I need to do to also get there in understanding? Yeah.